kind of a stupid idea of me not to have any B-roll of me setting up this stuff, but what are you gonna do? Heriz rugs are some of the most well-known and sought-after types of Oriental rugs. But why is that? Where do they come from? What is their history? And why do so many people like them? Let's talk about it. As a pre-bibliography, I just want to say that most of the points that I'll be talking about today come from A. Cecil Edwards' book, The Persian Carpet, and his chapter on Tabriz and Heriz rugs. So if there's a claim that sounds vague, take it up with him. Heriz, the Heriz area, also sometimes known as Goravan, lies in northwest Persia. There are several famous rug weaving villages in this area that rug nerds will freak about, including Karaja, Sirab, the actual village of Heriz, and the oldest in terms of weavings and perhaps the most distinguished area, Bakshayish. We're not going to touch on any of these villages any more than that because each of these kind of deserves and should have their own Unraveled episode. Today, we're just going to be focused on Heriz. For the purposes of this video, you should take into account two things. One, all of these villages are wrapped into a larger area generally called Goravan or the Heriz area. And today, we're going to be just focused on the weavings of the village within this Heriz area, Heriz. And two, the carpet weaving industry in this area does not stretch very far back. In fact, according to Cecil Edwards, there are no known weavings of any note further back than the year 1800, with, again, Bakshayish being the oldest area of any significance in regards to weaving. There is a village to the west of Heriz called Tabriz. Now, you may have heard of Tabriz rugs. Tabriz was for a long time known as a carpet weaving mammoth that would export pieces to Europe and the Americas en masse. The Tabriz weavers were known for their mastery in executing curvilinear shapes on carpets. That's to say that they were able to weave a convincing simulacrum of real-life curves, especially in botanical shapes, leaves, stems, and the like. But this is supposed to be about Heriz. Why are we talking about Tabriz? Well, Tabriz was known as a carpet weaving center for a long time, much longer than Heriz ever was. Village weaving in Heriz was not unheard of, but the export market didn't exist until the late 19th century. So why is that? Well, the theory is that the weavers of Tabriz were exporting many antique carpets to Europe and the Americas, and they were running out of stock. And so to mitigate this and fill demand, the Tabrizi weavers sent instructions and orders to the village of Heriz. Now, because these were Tabrizi weavers, these designs included highly curvilinear shapes, which were virtually unknown in Heriz. But an order is an order. The carpets must flow, and so the weavers tried their best. They were given instructions similar to these, and these were the results. While the product was nearly nothing like the intended design, the weavers of Heriz had just inadvertently set off a watershed moment in carpet manufacturing. Because these carpets from Heriz from the fourth quarter of the 19th century would go on to inform carpet and interior design trends well into the 20th century. But what was so special about these rugs? At the time, nothing. They were seen as cheap copies of Tabriz rugs. Elementary in design, coarse in their weave. The colors may have come off as garish, and the entire carpet may have just come off as awkward. And these factors were all reflected in the price, because Heriz rugs at the time were incredibly, relatively cheap. Compare that with the prices of 19th century and turn of the century Heriz rugs today, and this is a case truly of something being far ahead of its time. Heriz rugs come in a few different design types, the most common being the central medallion and 4 spandrels. This design was no doubt inspired or derived from the Tabriz rugs, which is why there are so many of them and why the design type bled deep into the 20th century. But Heriz rugs would see all sorts of patterns, including all-over patterns with large leaves and botanical motifs. There would be Hirati designs. There would be the flayed pelt motif, and sometimes just very rare and interesting types of Heriz rugs would pop up. All of these designs, though, from the usual suspects to the rarities, would share one common denominator: geometry. Geometric design was the name of the game for Heriz rugs. It's what set them apart then and what makes them great now. With the advent of minimalism, there was a total move away from Oriental rugs. These days, however, there does seem to be a movement of people moving away from this sterile design and into more maximalist sensibilities. And there seems to be no better in-between to this movement than Heriz rugs. So let's talk about some technical aspects of Heriz rugs. Heriz rugs are double wefted, and of course there is some variation with that when you get into true village weaves. They use a symmetrical, or sometimes called Turkish knot, which allows for more exaggerated designs. It's the same type of knot that we see in a lot of Caucasian rugs, or I should say most Caucasian rugs, almost all of them. There might be one or two, one that doesn't. I'm pretty sure they all use the Turkish, or the symmetrical knot. The dyes used in Heriz rugs were all natural or vegetal, especially the earlier pieces, and this continued deep into the 20th century, way further than its contemporaries would. You can find Heriz carpets from the 1940s still using a lot, not all, but a lot of vegetal dyes. And Heriz rugs would come in many different sizes, as they were mostly made for an export market, but the most common, the most well-known, and the most sought after are the room size, the area rugs. And now, we're gonna take a look at some examples. All right, so we're going to talk now about a couple examples of Heriz rugs, one younger and one older, and we'll start with the younger one, this one. This Heriz is from about 1940. The earlier Heriz rugs will have just really spectacular colors to them. Now, that's not to say that this doesn't have good colors. This is still using vegetal dyes. Right now, I'm just looking at sort of the typical telltale signs that a dye is not natural, and I'm not seeing many of them. The one that sticks out to me are the greens, these small, small accents. But really, those primary colors, where the color counts, and even some of the accents, especially that pink, does seem to be natural. Now, I'll be honest, there are some Heriz rugs from the 1940s, the same age as this one, that make me want to puke. They have this awful red or brown hue to them that just totally sucks the life out of what a Heriz to me is supposed to be. Now let's talk about design and motifs. I like the borders and I like the field. The borders and the field are the two things that my eye goes to immediately when I look at a rug. I'm like, zoop. So the border is utilizing this, some kind of medallion, interchanging medallion motif. It's not quite a Hirati pattern. There are two major medallions happening here. There's this one that has these sort of almost crab-like, it's almost harshang a little bit. I almost wonder if it's inspired by that, because it has the two claws on the front and the two claws on the back, and then that leads into this sort of oak leaf motif. The oak leaf is a pretty common motif that we see on a lot of Oriental rugs, especially Heriz. There's another one right here, but it's that sort of interchanging pattern, those two medallions going in and out of each other that this main border displays. It's not something you see very often, and it also is a reflection of what's on the main field, which, if we move to that, is this weird sort of amalgamation of central medallion and all over motif. To me, this is a nice in-between, because you could utilize it as a Heriz with a central medallion, or you could just call it an all-over, somewhat all-over motif. I'm saying this at the end. This is not a great example of a 1940s Heriz. This is just a really solid vintage Heriz. 1940s Heriz rugs, again, mostly, in my opinion, are going to be quite ugly. But this one has just a bit more character to it, and I think that's owed to the 1940s Heriz rugs that are still using natural dyes and hadn't lost that aspect of their construction just yet. So that is the 1940s vintage Heriz rug. So let's take a look at something just a little bit older. Whew. This is another Heriz, very classic Heriz rug from about circa 1900. It might be dipping into the 19th century a little bit, but this is a true antique Heriz rug. So, what are the elements that help us know that? I've heard this from other rug dealers, friends of mine, good colleagues and mentors, and it's very true that there are three things that help you tell the age of a rug. Color, color, color. That is the case with something like this. There are drawing elements that can help us to determine the age of certain rugs, but in the end, a lot of it, probably about 80% of it, will come down to the color used on a rug. And that is absolutely the case with old Heriz rugs like this. This is using all natural vegetal dyes, however you want to say it, madder, indigo. I don't know exactly what's used for this buff color. I don't know if it's weld. There's an organic quality, there's a softer quality to these colors, even though you could argue that they are, in a way, a bit more vibrant. Now, that might be the patterning going on the rug. You know, we have this kind of blue central medallion and this bubblegum field behind it, and then there's this navy, and then there's this buff camel color. There is undoubtedly a starkness to the colors on this rug, but because of the natural origin of the dyes, it's not electric. It sort of all just blends super well together. Now, of course, as you can see, classic Heriz design, the central medallion and the four spandrels. And what did I say before? Where do your eyes go? The border and the field. And man, this is such a awesome Heriz border. This is leaning into something that we would call serape, the border, not necessarily the field. If you have any tangential relation with rugs at all, you've probably heard of serape rugs. All you need to know for this video is that true serape rugs are from a specific time period of weaving in the Heriz area. What ends up happening is, after that time period, you get transitionary pieces, or pieces that show transitionary elements. And this is one of them, because this border is very close to something that we would see on a serape carpet. I guess I should say too, serape carpets are super important to design history, and they inform designs that go on the rugs that you buy at IKEA today. And the nice thing about this being sort of this transitionary Heriz is that it has some growing pains, because the Heriz medallions on the borders are not executed perfectly. They're a little bit wonky, they're a little bit primitive, which gives them so much character. The borders of this rug are so cool. Now, of course, like our other rug, there is a little bit of wear, a little bit of foundation exposure. The rug is already a one-of-a-kind piece. Any handmade rug is technically going to be one of a kind. And a certain amount of inoffensive wear just gives it that much more character. But the scale, the drawing, especially the colors, inform us that this rug is right from around the turn of the century and is just a really excellent example of a transitionary Heriz. So that's been Heriz rugs. I mean, there's always more to talk about. Rugs like this, to me, and we're getting really deep into it, sort of reflect the human condition, because everybody's an individual, everybody's beautiful in their own way, but everybody has flaws. Everybody has clumsy features to them. And you think about the Hirati border or even the drawing on here, it's very pretty, it's very individualistic, and yet perfection is not found within it. I don't know, but art reflects life, and Heriz rugs are a pretty good reflection. Anyway, that's about it for me. I'll see you in the next one.